we'll get into what it means to be a good partner. But I would encourage you, if you have an anxiety disorder and you are in a relationship with somebody who is not empathetic and cannot hold space for you, to consider the fact that you absolutely deserve someone that can. And I have been with men that do. I have been with men that drive 30 minutes in the night to sit with me when I'm scared. They exist. I think some people have a higher capacity for things.
Sure. I just mean like that it's very easy, at least for me, relationship OCD rears its ugly head when I'm with somebody who's stable.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't rear its head as much when I'm with somebody who is maybe more avoidant or less available, because my obsession clings to getting their attention as
Well,
opposed
and it's so funny because we talk about things like attachment style, and I think if you have an anxiety disorder, it's very possible that Christian and I talk a lot about attachment styles and codependency theories. All of these terms overlap, honestly. Like it's all kind of the same thing,
Mhm.
or a strand, like a thread of the same blanket. So it's like I get what you're saying. Like with avoidant men, the high of the chaos, I think, will shut my ruminations down.
Yeah, well, you ruminate about them, like you
You're
don't
lost in something else. Like, what are they going to call? Constantly hiding it, constantly masking the fact that you care so much.
Yeah, you just find other things to fixate on. And I mean, that applies to like that fixation applies to everything, like whether it's health OCD, where you just are like constantly worrying that something's wrong with your body. Um, you know, there's gender OCD as well, which is similar to the sexuality OCD. So, you're just like,
Am I
especially
a
as we
boy
have,
or a girl? Where am I
yes,
on the like, where am I on the scale of
and
gender fluidity? And
yeah, I think that'll become more common just as that's even a conversation we're having. Like when I was younger, there weren't a lot of conversations about trans people, and now we're having a lot of conversations. So it's like that's something that's at the forefront. So if you're prone to OCD, you might start to ruminate on that. And
yeah,
again, it comes back to what we were saying before. It's not hatred of those groups.
no,
It's a deep sense of self-distrust. It's a deep sense of like, I don't know who I am or what I am, and I like need to sit around and analyze it and over process everything until I figure it out.
yeah,
And then there are other ones. There's pedophile OCD, which is just like a constant fear that you could harm a child.
yeah.
I think it comes back to like people who feel like they're a monster deep down when they're
Mm-hmm.
not. And it's
I
not,
definitely relate to that in that there was a period of time in uh, high school where I was working with children, and I always thought it was the harm, like not the pedophile OCD, but the harm OCD around children. So I thought I was gonna kick them, or I was afraid to. I had never held a baby until my best friend just had a baby, and that was the first baby I've ever held,
wow.
because I am afraid that I'll drop it. And these things never come up unless I'm around them. That's why I don't have a pet. I'm afraid I'll hurt it.
Hmm.
Like, so these things don't ever come up until you're actually present in the situations.
Yeah. And to be clear, like pedophile OCD isn't necessarily like by any means something where it's like somebody is having thoughts about children and is
No,
afraid.
it's not fantasizing. It's like intrusive thoughts that,
It's like a blip on the radar, and then you're just like, ugh, like, why would my brain even ask me if that was possible for me to do something like that? Like, that's the same for like harm OCD. And there's a few other ones where it's just like your brain, like, I remember when I was like, I remember when I was in like third or fourth grade, I was in Christian private school, tiny classes, and I remember we were all circled up to pray for something, and it was like 10 of us all holding hands and praying, and I remember we're all praying, and I cannot take my eyes off of my like science teacher's crotch. And
Yeah.
I
Oh
was
my
like,
gosh. Was yeah.
crotches.
Crotches, crotch.
Crotch
And what's so
OCD.
funny, actually, this could be totally botched, but I think this feels like I've read this somewhere. I think Tourette's is like a branch of OCD.
Yeah. I
Because
don't
your
know
brain is
for
doing this
sure,
like,
but
yeah, I'm not sure.
people can have both. Yeah.
Yeah, like the tick is really similar. And I actually had a compulsive like staring issue for a while. Like, my brain would say, don't break eye contact, don't break eye contact. And so it'd just be like,
Uh-huh.
wild
Spencer
eyes.
Pratt.
That's their bad eyes.
Yeah.
Uh, I do want to get into our childhood experiences with it.
Yeah. Well,
Something,
we were going to talk about existential OCD, which I
oh
thought
yeah,
was
which is
really,
our whole personality. That's our
yeah.
shtick.
I didn't even know that it was a thing until you mentioned it, and then
Yeah.
you
Well,
kind
I
of,
didn't know it was a thing until I actually am wondering if it's only recently that they've come out with terming it, but
I think it must be new.
it's when you are compulsively like thinking about existence and like what God is and why we're here and compulsion to purpose and compulsion to, and it's like, I thought I was just like a very cerebral, deep creative thinker, and that's probably true, but all of the hangups and triggers around that of like, I definitely can be exhausted by the minute my feet hit the floor in the morning because of these massive thoughts that I'm always thinking,
Hmm.
and can't turn off. And that is a form of it.
I'm wondering if like this idea that you have to always sort of have a purpose and meaning for everything ties into existential OCD.
Hmm.
That's definitely something that I've dealt with where it's just like if something doesn't have like direct purpose and meaning, like
Yeah, like I can't do it. Like
yeah,
I have to have intentionality,
which
or
also
I,
ties back into our OCD where like if I don't feel like this person is the person for forever, magical foreverness,
yep.
like I can't, I'm not allowed to go there or something.
Then you'll obsess about like their nose or their like, and everything will become really wonky and disproportional. Like one time I was like, I've never noticed how big his nose is. It's so big. He has the biggest nose I've ever seen. I can't unsee it. And it sounds funny, and it probably is funny to people who don't experience it, but then you're around them and you can't be present in the moment because you're like nose, 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 nose. Like there's no break from it. I went on two Tinder dates a couple years ago, and I wasn't even on them. Like I was there, but my brain was like fixated on this guy's like knuckle hair. And it was like knuckle hair, knuckle hair, knuckle. It's like, well, I guess I'm never going to be able to get to know anybody. And it's why I think dating it's so hard. It's so lonely.
Yeah. People would say like why are you still single, and I would just be like I I didn't necessarily know, and now in retrospect I'm like, "Oh, because like it's really hard to date with this, and I when have potential, it's just so much easier to not be in a relationship than to be in one." Um so yeah, so you just kind of stay out of it.
Yeah, I
Um
think that's where I camp. And it's really interesting because I think, well, it's both. I don't want to deteriorate what I know to be true. Like, I have a beautiful life. Like, I love my life. I've done really hard, good work to be satisfied alone. I healthfully would like a partner, but also as a freelancer dealing with all this like new world post 2020, I don't have the stamina to get out and meet new people because it would fucking like I just can't date on apps for me because it will shipwreck my sanity. Doesn't I don't have the bandwidth to do it. And I went first last time talking about my stalker, so Christiana's gonna go first this time. But I wanted to talk about the kind of what like united us. Well, she didn't know it, but a couple of years ago I was at a house show and she played Ritual for the first time, and there's a line about tapping the windowsill.
I used to tap the window sill till it was safe to go to sleep.
Mhm.
Do you want to say it? Do you want to say the beautiful
I
line you
used to
wrote?
tap the windowsill. That's how it
Yeah,
goes.
thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
uh,
Yeah.
but the whole idea is like she couldn't fall asleep until it was done so many times, and um I had never known somebody in close proximity that had been open about their OCD. And so I was like, we're so much alike. And I think it took several years for our friendship to come into culmination, but we really are. We create from kind of the same place. I think we also fear from the same place. So um it was, yeah, this just really interesting thing. And then after we got to know each other, our childhoods were very parallel. So
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't even know that you had OCD until we started talking as like new friends like 6 months ago.
mhm,
I had no idea. Like you said something to me, I think after that show about really connecting with that and that I like tapped on my guitar and you really felt it. But
mhm,
I don't assume that people know what songs mean right away. And that song is so overtly about OCD and the music video is so overtly about OCD. But a lot of people with not with a lot of people with not OCD, without OCD, like have connected with it about just depression or anxiety or whatever. So I don't assume that if somebody's really into that song that they like have OCD. Um, but that's just I just wanted to write something about the weight of how I felt, which was that like most of my life felt like treading water. So and that is kind of what it feels like. It feels like treading water. It feels like you're constantly doggy paddling to keep your mouth above water so you don't drown.
mhm,
Um I guess for me, the way that it started was like as a kid, really young. I grew up in a really religious home with a lot of kind of sort of charismatic themes. And when I say charismatic, what that means is like emphasis on the spiritual, emphasis on the unseen, and on spiritual warfare, that there are like dimensions happening around us that we can't even see, and there are spiritual gifts like speaking in tongues and prophecy and all the wackadoo stuff that you hear about and don't believe is real. And so I grew up around that, and around 5 years old, I also, side note, like found out later that this runs in my family to an extent too, which genetics play into it. It's nature and nurture a lot of the time. And so 5 years old, my parents would put me to bed, and I would. This grew over time. It's really funny, but I would say good night, and then it turned into good night, 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 and it turned into over time. Good night, 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 sweet dreams, pleasant dreams. Don't let the bed bugs bite. See you tomorrow. I love you. And I had to say that every night. And my parents just were like, eh, she's a weirdo, but it's fine. And they just totally humored me, and they would say it back, or they'd let me say it and they'd wait and whatever. And then as I got older, around like 8 or so years old, I started washing my hands all the time. Um, until they were cracked and bleeding. And every time I would wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and I would end up spending an hour in the bathroom, because I used so much fucking toilet paper that
mhm, yep,
I would consistently clog toilets at restaurants
yes,
when my
yep,
family would go out. And it was problematic, but it was because I was like, even if I couldn't see anything on the toilet paper, I felt like there was something there, and I just had to be as clean as possible.
mhm,
And there were other things. There were bedtime rituals, like you said. I would tap my windowsill until it felt just right. Um, there was not a number for me. It was just, if I don't do this, demons are gonna get me.
mm,
That's all I know. And if I don't wash my hands, my germs are somehow going to get on my parents, and they are going to die. All I
yeah,
knew is that somehow me washing my hands equated to my parents staying alive.
mm,
Existential OCD. I remember like laying in bed as a little kid and recognizing that like death meant the end of everything that I knew was familiar. Um, and if hell was real, it could mean an eternal lake of fire, and just like ruminating until I would spiral into a depression. I was so concerned with like being good and being in the will of God and being afraid, like we said before, about like the scissors at night. And it was weird because it like waxed and waned. And I don't know what, between like the age of like 8 and 11, which were like two major spikes in like hand washing for me. I do very distinctly remember my mom like ripping me away from the kitchen sink one day, and it was like almost my first experience with exposure therapy.
Mm.
But up until then, my parents had no idea what was going on. My mom was just like stressed about it. My dad thought it was me wanting attention and just trying to make his life miserable on vacations when I had to put my hair up in a ponytail like 72 times and we were late for
Mm.
brunch, you know. And they did what they knew best. I don't blame them, but they took me to a Christian counselor who basically told me to recite scripture,
Ah.
which is the opposite of how to solve the problem.
Oh, or they tell you it's rooted in sin because fear is sin and all this.
No, I was too young for that.
Mm.
I mean, they might have like contributed it to like some sort of demonic force or something, but for me, it was like listen to these Joyce Meyer tapes
Oh
and
God.
and
I actually read the Battlefield of the Mind. I think
yeah, I'm
I
sure.
read that for my OCD, even though I was not a Christian. Like I read it in high school.
Yeah, I might have been that. I don't remember. I remember listening to her tapes on my Walkman, my yellow Walkman,
No,
like
no, no, no,
cassettes.
no.
But here's the thing, reciting scripture is just another ritual you're giving somebody with OCD. It does not work that way. You just learn to like latch onto something else as opposed to face the fear of it. And so yeah, they just did what they knew best, but like what they knew best was the absolute wrong thing to do. So I I dealt with that as a kid, and then I just sort of, through high school it was like not eating disorder, like the same way that OCD and pure O are two separate things but also the same thing. I had like obsessions with eating and with
Mhm.
dieting, but I never had like a concrete eating disorder because I loved food and I couldn't not eat it. And I couldn't make myself throw up, even though I can remember trying. But I, was on a diet all the time. Again, my parents just thought they were helping me by like sending me to a nutritionist at like 12 years old or 13 years old because they wanted me to feel good about myself. And if losing weight made me feel good, then so be it. I still definitely have a sense of this like just right OCD, especially translates into how I make music, which is really hard because it brings out an excellence in your music, but it's torture. And you don't want to make music a lot of the time because even though everybody around you is telling you that you can't quit it, like you're doing good stuff, like you have like a mental battlefield of the mind every time that you sit down to work because you know that all that perfectionism is going to like seep to the surface. But really ultimately, like the way that I got diagnosed, because my parents were only taking me to a Christian counselor, was that I was like just hanging out at my house one day and an episode of Maury was on. I was probably like 16 or something. I don't even remember. And they're, of course, like making it into a sideshow and like but like the title of the show was obsessive compulsive disorder, and they were describing what all these people were afraid of and their rituals and the things that they would do, and I was like, holy shit, these people are like me. And so
Yeah.
I like called my mom and I was like, look at this, and she was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's crazy. And I was like, no, like this is what I have, like this is the thing, like there's a label
Mm.
for it. I had no idea. I just thought this is how some people are like. um so I got diagnosed by Maury, and I totally understand that there are some people that have been clinically diagnosed and would say that it doesn't count. Well, I guess my response to that is like, fuck off, because I haven't gone through this for however long to have it delegitimized. And I say that with complete love, but like, it is not everybody has the luxury of having a therapist, having a psychiatrist, or having even like a legitimate doctor. And sometimes you just know what's going on. And when I tried to find a specialist for OCD, it was a lot of work, and I still don't have one. I
And
just
you know
have a
what? They're
standard
very
therapist.
expensive.
They're
They're
very
very
expensive.
expensive. It's unfair. There is not a solid demographic of people to select from for the
I
specific, for exposure therapy specifically.
I wish I could remember the quote I got from the one OCD specialist that was recommended to me. Um, the thing that helps though is that it is just acting in spite of those feelings, and just like proving to myself in small little ways that like those things that I have like spinning in the back of my head are not true, because like, look, I did this thing and nobody died. I did this
Mm.
thing and I actually, the outcome was really good. I mean, that is sort of a form of exposure therapy. Even mistakes, like making mistakes, are a form of exposure therapy. And I have, for the majority of my life, just been so prone to living exclusively within the confines of my own mind and in some sort of like fantasy world, because that
Mm.
seems so much safer. I could romanticize the shit out of it. I never have to like worry about rejection, except for the ones that I make up in my head. But it does just come back to like having a hard time trusting myself, and wondering if I don't feel right, if the thing doesn't feel good in the moment, and if I don't feel aligned with the universe, if I am just royally fucking everything up. Um, but yeah, like the further I get from the spaces that sort of encourage that thinking, and actively cultivate a safe space for myself, the less I'm triggered, and the more that I can actually like work through those things, you know?
Mhm.
So yeah, but that's my story. What's
Yeah,
it like for you?
what's it like for me? Well, so my mom has said this many times. She said as a baby, I was inconsolable. Like I could be fed, I could, be held, I could be like she could do all these things for me, but I was just like an inconsolable child. Um, and so it makes me wonder if there was an issue of temperament, because almost all the women in my family either struggle with with some realm of anxiety. From, I know my great grandmother was a hypochondriac, like that actually create like that she bled to death on blood thinners because she would go
Whoa.
to the doctor and they would continue to prescribe to her because she had OCD. And back then that was not something that they knew. And obviously you could go to a psych ward or be treated with things like lithium. Like, there was no advocacy, there was no studies or research on it. And then, I mean, every single woman in my family has that, the bigness. And
Yeah.
so, but then in when I was probably a toddler to like age 5, I was very preoccupied with matching my clothing. Like
Uh-huh.
everything had to be just right. Like it had to match perfectly. And then that got into, I had a lot of the cleanliness and contamination things when I was younger, like in kindergarten. Not that I would ask other people, but I would wash my hands until they were raw. And I would I would use toilet paper and I would check my butthole in the mirror. I would legitimately, I would ask my imaginary dance group, which I had. It consisted of,
What?
yeah, I had an imaginary dance crew because I was an only child. So I had to make up my friends. I still kind of do in
But
adult
like some
life.
people, like most people have like one imaginary friend. You had
I
an
had a
entire
crew.
dance crew
Dude, we were on tour
of
together
dancers.
all the time. Yeah, actually, Tommy, the White Power Ranger, was my imaginary boyfriend, and he was
Hot.
around. He was hot. Yeah, he's the best. But I would ask them politely to leave the bathroom. And I would like check my butthole. And then one time in the
Check
game
your
of
just
okay, so I would like turn around to the mirror and like spread my butt cheeks and like make sure that I was clean. So one time, my grandfather was a minister, so like I would spend the summers with my grandparents. And one time during vacation Bible school, when I had been like with them for the summer, all these kids and I were playing hide and seek, and I was like, "This is the perfect time. Everybody's hiding. I'm gonna go to the bathroom, and I'm gonna lock the door."
So I can check my butthole.
What were you checking for? Poop?
Yeah, yeah.
How would you even be able to see?
I have no, there's no logic in it, as you know.
Yeah.
Right?
So, yeah.
So
you just have to do it.
you just got us. So I'm in there. And then
Checking your
it's like,
butthole.
I'm checking my butthole, and there's like a sink, and like there's nothing under it. Like there's no cabinets or anything. It's just like one of those countertops that comes out. And one of my really good friends, like I hear a voice, and she goes, what are you doing? And I was like, is that the voice of God? Because I don't know. Can you help me? Can you help me stop this? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I think I was just like, I'm just checking, like, that moment of, like, baby panic. But it's weird because I bounced back real quick. Like, I bounced back from that experience like a champ. I think I just, like, dissociated.
It's just like, I've heard this story before, but it's just still, like...
It's different now. I know, it amazes me every time.
It still gets me.
I think there's so much of my personality infused in it. Like, that it's like, yeah, I did that.
No, I think it's just at this time I like I think it's just that, like, this time I was like really picturing it and like
yeah, and I'm like so chubby. Like I'm like that. It's just, she's seen my childhood pictures, so it's like I'm like standing there, and my friend is like she's crouched up under the sink, and she's like horrified.
Wait, why was she under the sink?
Because we were playing hide and seek. So she had chosen to hide in the bathroom, and I had closed the door and locked it, thinking nobody's going to see me do this.
I'm just trying, like, I'm dying because I'm like imagining being her.
And I even got a stool. Like there was a stool in front of the sink, but somehow I didn't see her. I grabbed it and I like I was like, lock it, put the stool there. No one can come in. I'm going to check my butthole. I turned around and I like pulled down my pants, and I was like lifting because you're like, I'm short and chubby, and like I'm looking in the mirror, and it's like, I'm really like looking. And she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, motherfucker. Like, you know?
It's like that TikTok that like TikTok trend or whatever, but instead it's like butthole check.
Yeah, totally.
I'm imagining her being like play by play, like watching it slowly happen. Just like, being like,
what is this girl doing?
What's happening? What is she? And then you just start spreading your own.
Yeah, because I think I was probably like, I was old enough. Like I was already in grade school, so I had to be like 7 or 8, like maybe 2nd grade. I don't know.
Can we please call this podcast Butthole Check?
Yes, I would like to butthole check living with OCD. So then I had a lot of weird. My only I didn't have a lot of God stuff growing up, but I had some, and it's faint in my mind. I was completely terrified in an OCD way, not like a little kid boogeyman way, of Bloody Mary. I was obsessed.
Yeah, this
another
is not
one
church stuff.
No, and another one that even now it makes me wonder if it's the existential. I would go to bed at night knowing I was going to die by the next morning. And every night it would just like stay awake thinking you only have a few hours left to live. Like you only have a few hours. And like I was little thinking I was going to die. And the harm stuff started for me very young, and it would happen on the dot at 7:00 every night, like on the dot. Whoa. I would know, my body would know it was 7:00 because I would think like, you're going to stab someone to death. You're going to stab someone to death. And I would go and I would tap the scissors. I'd walk through the living room. my parents would be laying on the couch watching TV. I'd go lay down in my bed and like turn, like, you know, try to get comfortable. Then I'd go touch the scissors, go lay back down in bed, and like for hours.
Whoa.
And when it wasn't harm, I was a big kid and I was really bullied for the way that I looked. And so if clothes touched my skin, and I think even now this is probably why I wear so many layers. It's not a body confidence issue. It's like the physical sensation of clothing on my skin. It's like people can see my tummy. I can see my tummy. Like, and I would get in the mirror and I would like for hours a night be like, what does it look like when I do like all these different poses? What does my belly look like when I'm sitting? What does it look like? And I would wear the same clothes every single day.
Yeah, because
Or the same outfit because it was safe.
It bypasses. Yeah, I mean, I can relate to that too. Like when I would have eating disorder related stuff, it was like I remember I missed half of driver's ed because I was too busy like looking around the room and being like, well, that girl's stomach is like definitely like 8 inches from the desk and mine is only like 4 inches from the desk.
Yeah, weird. And
So,
standing next to other women and being like this whole thing, like that,
yeah,
like
it was
weird measurements. And now it's funny because
crippling.
it's
Yeah.
crippling. I don't struggle with that at all anymore. It's
Yeah.
very weird. I don't. It just that one went away for me completely.
Yeah.
ROCD started showing up for me in high school. I was very obsessed with the fact. I was like, I don't love my boyfriend. I don't love my boyfriend. I don't love my boyfriend, like that. And but my ROCD overlapped with OCD. So anytime that I'm in a state of relationship OCD, I'm like, I like women. I can't be with him because I like women. I can't be with him because I like women. And so they kind of coincide and it's too much. Like my brain can't handle it. One though, that Dr. Drew helped me with, I guess, was when I first got my driver's license, I would drive around the block, and if I passed anybody on foot, I would think I hit them. So I'd have to drive back around, and I would be late getting places because I would have to drive back around like 16 times. And it's like, why did you miss your morning class? I had to drive around the neighborhood 16 times because I thought I hit someone and killed them with my car. And that's a really common one. And the working with children was really triggering, you know, and then it's weird because I went to Bible college, but I actually didn't struggle a lot with OCD outside of the skin stuff. I was completely consumed with skincare and mirrors and I was with a very loving partner in college, and he would say, you're so mean to yourself. You're so hard on yourself. I think that people perceive that as being self-critical and they don't realize that it's like a tick, you know?
Yeah. I mean, self-criticism is definitely part of it. It's
Yeah.
woven through it in a lot of ways because you just feel like something's wrong with you all the time and you're constantly trying to figure out what it is. But it's really, it is just like the biggest thing about it is like, no matter what facet of it you are engaged with, it just sucks so much energy from you. Like the more and more that I sort of loosen its grip on me, which I don't know that I'll ever be, you know, I mean, I would like to be completely free of it. I don't even know that I would know when I was, because there have been seasons where I think that I am. But the more that I,
like dormant.
yeah, but the more that I find ways to cope and heal, the more that I realize that like it just sucks the energy out of your body.
Yeah. I think that's the thing too, is like now I like to date is like to go into the dark night. Like somebody has to be really worth it. I don't do it a lot, which is funny because we have a dating podcast, but I don't actually date a lot. I usually only date people where I'm like, this feels like it could really be the anomaly. Like, and they're worth it. Like I can already tell up front that they're worth it.
Yeah.
The trouble is, you know, when you have OCD, it's really hard to tell fear versus intuition.
Yeah.
And if you are more anxiously attached, sometimes something wild and silky seeming is actually you're ending up with someone that's like fucking kryptonite. And then you get destroyed by them. And then your OCD I have a very hard time grieving because it will ruminate over and over again. I'll get really bad trauma flashbacks, which is more of a trauma thing, but I think it's common with like that ruminative cycle. That's why I have compassion for my stalker. I understand. Like, I'm serious. I get it that you can't stop thinking about me, but it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Like, it has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. And I think that's the difference though between somebody like us, like people like us. I think we know it's not them. So like I may be thinking about you calling me for every second that I breathe because I can't stop because I have a chemical imbalance. But it has nothing to do with my actual want for you to call me. I might actually be feeling really introverted that day and I want you to leave me the fuck alone. Like, it's a weird thing.
No, I get it. I mean, I've like spent an entire day thinking about somebody who I may have gone on a date on that I wasn't even interested in.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like,
It's hard to
why? Like,
tell.
it's like it's like I'm just processing everything. But all that to say, like, just because somebody has a chemical imbalance does not mean that they are exempt from boundaries. And if
Yeah.
anything, I think that our friendship, which we kind of touched on earlier, has benefited from the fact that we both know that the best thing that we can do for each other in those moments is to say, like, you've got this. I cannot talk you off this ledge, but I
Yeah.
do believe that like you can find it within yourself to like have the strength to endure this, and that it's gonna be okay. And
Yeah.
and like just, instead of trying to like,
And it's never like, it's always an active love. Like I always know when people who really love me, like Zeb does this too in the most beautiful way. It's like when people can carefully, lovingly step away from me to preserve our friendship, that doesn't feel like abandonment to me. Like that's like
Mhm.
the biggest, because it's like I know it's not me. They're gonna come back. They're just gonna let me essentially spiral until I stop. Because you're like a
Mhm.
spinning top. You kind of have to.
Yeah. And that, yeah, I mean, that's a big part of it. Like, sort of just letting people have the space to do that, which kind of ties into like what it is that if you were dating somebody, and this is really helpful because my last boyfriend was a really wonderful person. And I would say that our OCD is probably a huge crux in the reason that we broke up. And I can like fully own that and admit it. He even did kind of like what I would recommend anybody do if your partner has ROCD, which is to research it and understand it, because otherwise you're going to take it personally. And at a certain point, you can't help but take it personally, and that's totally understandable too. Like,
Yeah, like your experience is valid too. It's
yeah,
not easy. We're not saying it's easy. We're also not saying it's a measure of your love, because that's not you having the capacity to handle it, something that's not yours that you didn't ask for. No
yeah,
one's asking you to do that. At the same time, we can't help it. So like mitigating the resentment and watching your words is so important.
yeah. I mean, if you can learn how to hold space for that person, it really does go a long way. And there is a certain point where you just have to protect yourself, and that's fine. But if you really are like super invested and really want to do the work, and you're going to do everything in your power to make it work, which sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. I would say some things that like really stood out for me, especially in my last relationship, um, were or things that I need like in those environments, which I think it's helpful to hear, is just like somebody who provides a level of stability, and somebody who provides patience. Like, again, you just like understand that it's not about your shortcomings. It's that this person's brain is latching onto stuff. If anything, it's like their inability to allow you your autonomy, which feels embarrassing. Honestly, it's like I shouldn't fucking care what you wear, or like what your nose looks like. I mean, we all care
Well,
what
I mean,
our
the thing
partner's
is, you
nose
don't.
looks like.
I
You
wouldn't say
don't
you
know.
care.
It's your brain just like latches on
Freaking
to
out.
something. um and I can see this like happened in high school, like, and in retrospect it's like it's so obvious. But yeah, just like providing stability anything you can essentially do to like keep your partner's like like brain from just spiking all over the place in your power, but like recognize that you can't control all of that. um just consistency. And honestly, for
Mhm.
me, it's so weird, but like a little bit of reverse psychology tends to work.
Yeah,
Like,
I love cerebral people that can be like, does that seem logical? Like, really, like,
yeah, like like straight talk works. Just like be yourself and be who you are, and honestly don't pander. Like don't
no,
like
I think that makes
learn
it
and
worse.
educate yourself, but don't try to coddle the person, because that doesn't really work with OCD. We'll just keep seeking reassurance. Our drug
Yeah,
of
it's like,
choice is
don't tell me
reassurance.
what I want to hear, but also be tender with what you say. And
Yeah,
there's a
just
balance.
be strong and assured and stable and understanding, but don't like we will find like I said, reassurance is our drug of choice. Like we will find any way to get you to comfort us so that we don't feel uncomfortable. And
If we ask you the same question in about 50 different ways, we're probably checking.
exactly. So, I mean, that's kind of what works for me. Reverse psychology, in the sense that like I do need space sometimes. And sometimes I need people to just take, because it helps take the pressure off. When the pressure's on, I think sometimes that's why I'm drawn to avoidant people, because I know they'll give me space. And in order to take the pressure off long enough for me to take a breath, I need a little bit of room once in a while to just reassess and remind myself, like, I need to be able to miss somebody.
I think for me, it's very clear communication about where you're at, like in the process. Like,
Mhm.
for example, I am not the type of person that ever like wants to lock a relationship down really quickly. Like, I'm never going to ask that. But like, something for me is to understand where people stand. So if you don't know what you want, or you feel pressured by my asking, or you're reactive, or you disappear, or I think it's the consistency. It's clarity, consistency, and communication all the time, and being open to like have a conversation.
Yeah.
Which that's just good relational hygiene anyway. That's like, but for somebody with OCD, it's really important because you coming back again, like some of it's an abandonment trauma thing, but then some of it is like just a real thing of like, I need to visibly see you in a physical space, like show up for me in a consistent manner so that my brain can like know you are like relatively safe. And yeah, I think it's it's so hard because my OCD has responded so differently depending on the person.
Hmm.
I can say I have had 3 relationships that were really valuable to me where it didn't show up and completely attack the other person. I wish I knew what that thread was. I have no
Hmm.
idea. I've thought about it so much, obviously. Um, but yeah, I don't I don't know, other than just being patient and also know that I'm gonna seem inconsistent. And please, never, 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 never call me crazy,
Hmm.
gaslight me, use my anxiety against me, make me feel small. Like, it's so interesting because I think that sometimes really even wonderful partners feel like it's kind of like an animal, how animals sense sickness in other animals, and like one is alpha. I feel like humans do that. Like even really healthy people kind of assert themselves over you as the healthy one, and it's like, don't belittle me. I think if nothing else, we're stronger than most to like carry this on our fucking back every day and
True. Yeah.
live in the world.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
I i really have noticed just a correlation between painting and writing and getting out that energy. um I there are just too many highly creative people that have it.
Mm.
I know that's something you were saying that a lot of the people that you know struggle with. I think it's like anxiety specifically. I think is like creativity looking for a way to get out.
Yeah, I mean, the people I know people who specifically have OCD who are just like some of the most brilliant creatives, and it's partially because their threshold or their standard is so high for themselves. So like what they put out is just really brilliant, and like it's brilliant, but it's also like really honed. For better or worse, you just really can't know where it's come from. But for me, I find that like, I have a handful of things that I do to help sort of calm my stressors, and some days I'm better than others. Some days it's just like caution to the wind, like let's just see what shakes loose in the realm of uh toxicity, I guess. But like other days I try to be disciplined. It's tough to be disciplined though, because you want to have a morning routine and then your brain goes, you better do this or else.
Yeah.
But I try to journal and do yoga and meditate.
Meditation's been a game changer. That's been over the past few weeks. I've been trying it and everybody said it would be great. But for me, I mean, it is like night and day. Like, I
Well,
don't think that I've had a major, like, I haven't had trauma flashbacks in the last 3 days. I've slept full nights and full nights around, like, I had to stay up late last night, but I haven't had the symptoms as bad.
and if you deal with like your brain constantly having monkey mind, like guided meditations are great. That's what I do. I think that's what you do, where
Mm-hmm.
you just have somebody, because your brain can like sort of just follow the leader. And spending time with safe people, but also like spending time away from people and slowing down consciously. um and I mentioned sort of like facing fears, like actively, like
Mm-hmm.
consciously just being like, I feel sort of agoraphobic today, like something bad might happen if I leave my house, and leaving anyway, you
Mm-hmm.
know. But with creativity, it's like I do see that when I am actively creating, like I don't seem to have all of that stagnant energy. Exercise as well.
Yeah,
um
super good for it.
there's some stuff that just like needs to burn off, and I think this is just my theory, there's no science behind this, but my theory is just that like when that extra energy, creative or just energy, I don't know, is stuck in our bodies, like we just sort of don't know what to do with it, and our brains are just like, I don't know, touch this thing 100 times, like.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's going to create anyway. Like, it's just like it's going to create regardless whether it's destructive or constructive.
Well, because
Um,
if you're prone to fear,
mhm.
if that's sort of your default, if something that happened to you when you grew up, whatever, it'll latch on to fear, and then it just manifests as a creative way to dispel the fear
Yeah,
instead of sort of alchemizing into something
I will say
beneficial.
that all of my creative hats do something different for me.
Okay.
Like painting chills me out. Like, it really will take away the compulsions. Writing, well, I feel like writing helps me when I'm depressed to activate, and painting helps me when I'm anxious to deactivate.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Especially because like, yeah, I don't know, there's like people say that depression is a lot of like fixating on the past, and anxiety tends to be more based in the future. So it's
Hmm.
interesting that
Hmm.
one does one better. I mean, I guess because you're processing the past and then you're just sort of getting present.
Hmm.
That's
Well,
really
and the
interesting.
mediums I use are super tactile, so it's kind of like just getting in my body. Like, I feel it on my hands. I smell the materials. Like, it's a very present thing.
And you're just like getting your eyes off of screens, but like, which is hypocritical to say as a video podcast, but like, I think that really does help us to
Yeah.
just get out in the world and feel it, and to just be in the moment that we're in. Um, but you really do have to cultivate consciously this notion that where you are is safe. And if you felt unsafe for a long time, or you're in an environment where you are not safe, then these things are going to perpetuate, because this is how your brain is coping. It's how your body is coping. It's just trying to preserve your sanity. Like,
Mhm.
so on some level, if you have OCD, like, you have to sort of befriend the OCD and ask it like what it's trying to tell you. Because
'Cause sometimes it's a feeling. Like sometimes it's like, I don't want to feel sad. Like sometimes
yeah,
it's like, you know.
sometimes it's you love this person so much that you're afraid of losing them, you know? Like,
Yep.
you know, it's
Yeah.
usually indicative of something like that. So yeah, but so the best thing you can do for yourself is to find ways to calm your nerves, relax, de-stress, bring those stress hormones back to baseline. And I mean, I hate to say it, but a really good way to do that is a little bit of
ASMR.
misconnections ASMR. So
Bring it all to me.
here's the thing. So I went Nashville for this one as an homage to
This
you.
better be somebody that is in love with me.
And if maybe if this sounds familiar, if you don't live in Nashville, you won't necessarily understand how Nashville this misconnections is, but it's just so Nashville, and it's like saccharine Nashville. So let's get started. I I didn't even read the title. I only read the actual paragraphs before, and it's such a bad. Okay, here we go. Yeah, let's just again take a deep breath with us. Prepare your body. This misconnection is titled LaCroix Volvo Man at Turnip Truck in the Gulch. Hi. We reached for cases of LaCroix together this morning at Turnip Truck on 12th Ave South in the Gulch. You then proceeded to check out in front of me, and despite your mask covering the majority of your face, your energy and your eyes were incredibly handsome and intriguing to me. I'm not normally shy, but apparently COVID has made me so. I overheard you being kind to the cashier, which we all know is hotter than hot.
Where's the lie?
I'm just picturing this person, and like I know exactly who they are. Their name is Jenny. They're wearing yoga pants.
Yeah, or like high-waisted, like the mom jean.
True, that too.
And
They
this
got
guy definitely has like Christian tattoos and probably goes to the church where everybody all wears neutrals.
well, join us next time for another episode of Impractical Magic, where we'll be talking about butt stuff and just kidding. We'll be talking about something else we haven't decided on yet.
Yeah, do the jingle.
All right, here it comes.